Scary telling. This happened many decades ago, while I was still a young schoolboy. Imagine those days, no smartphones, no video games, no internet, not even CDs and DVDs. It was a time when entertainment meant going to the cinema, especially if you were a young boy living in small-town India. And I certainly lived in a small, dusty town near the east coast of southern India. We lived in a small rented house close to the railway line. The notable thing about this railway line was that it almost bisected the town. It was a major line, connecting Madras in the south to Calcutta in the northeast. They weren't called Chennai and Kolkata back then. Most of the old town lived west of the railway line, while some of the new developments grew on the eastern side. As children, we really looked forward to the movies because these were rare events. The movie I wanted to watch was an old, black and white film. It was a hugely popular film back in the day and it was being re-released. And so I was full of excitement. Soon, the movie released in a theater called Vijaya Mahal. And Vijaya Mahal was on the other side, on the eastern side, of the railway line while we lived on the western side. For some reason I don't remember now, I decided to catch the late night show, typically starting around 10 p.m. and lasting up to almost 1 a.m. in the morning. Despite some grumbling, I received permission from the family. The day finally arrived, and after an early dinner, I bounded off with excitement. I sat spellbound, thoroughly enjoying the fights, the songs, and all the usual stuff. The movie finally got over around 1 a.m. The few people who came to watch the late night show took different routes to wherever they had to go. As for me, I was thrilled. I was over the moon. As I walked back, I kept reliving the scenes in my fantasy-filled teen head. Further along the railway line, there was a manned railway gate about 1 kilometer from the theater, where all the traffic was supposed to cross over to the other side. But it was 1 a.m. and the town was fast asleep. All was quiet except for the sound of crickets from the wayside bushes. Instead of crossing the railway tracks at the manned gate, I decided to just walk across and make a shortcut of it. In a while, I crossed the thorny thumb of bushes that acted as feeble barriers around the railway line. As I approached, even the crickets fell silent. I started climbing the steep embankment made of crushed gravel that cushioned the trackway over to my right. In the far distance, I could see the dim lights set around the railway gate, distant and hardly visible. Back where I was, I crunched over the gravel and got to the top of the embankment. It was quite dark, but I wasn't scared. In fact, I wasn't even conscious of my surroundings. I was a boy lost in his celluloid reveries. Now, I crossed the first railway track and started descending. A few feet away was the second rise with the second track. I slowly stepped into the hollow between the two embankments. I was right in the middle. Something soft touched my feet. I looked down but couldn't see anything. Not even my feet. The darkness seemed denser in the hollow. There was no moon in the sky and hardly any starlight. What was it? Still in my distracted mind, I acted without thinking. What was it touching my feet? I bent close to the ground and my hand stretched to touch whatever was touching me. A few moments passed. Slowly, I came out of my reverie. Now I was back in this world, conscious of the darkness, conscious of the sound of crickets that took up the chorus again, conscious of my exposed feet and simple batted chap pals, conscious that my face was inches from the ground, almost smelling it, conscious of something soft against my feet, and conscious of my fingers touching a softness. The dim world came into focus. And I saw two eyes staring into mine, their whites barely visible in the dimness. They looked at me as I looked at them, inches apart. and I saw what my fingers were grabbing. It was hair, soft, loose, long, lifeless, wet. I was looking at a human head, a female head. I was standing where her body should have been. Something clenched inside. Very, very slowly. I let go of the hair and stood up. I backed up a couple of steps. Cautiously, deliberately, silently, I started moving away from her. With all my senses now focused, I climbed the other embankment, making sure I didn't slip on the loose gravel. One step at a time, one breath at a time. As I crossed the second track, I noticed, dimly again, what might have been a body without a head. I wasn't sure. I didn't want to be sure. I descended the second berm without turning my head. My back was tingling, as though it was being watched by a pair of dead eyes. What if a dead mouth suddenly whispered my name? What if that blurry, indistinct headless body, just a few feet behind me, suddenly rolled over and reached out at my ankles? Stop it. Stop thinking. One step, one breath. Soon I was walking among the brambles again. This time I wasn't careful. I didn't notice the thorns scratching at me. I didn't feel the web of bleeding lines they made on my exposed calves and knees. I needed to keep walking, and that's what I did. Finally, I was on the other side, on the road that ran along the track and then away from it. Standing under a lamp post and the dull pool of flickering light it made, I looked down at my feet. Nothing was touching them. I didn't want to look at my slightly wet right hand. I only wanted to leave it behind so it didn't come with me. And then I started running as silently as I could, so as not to wake the dead. In the small town of Ravenwood, there was an old railway station that had been abandoned for years. No one knew exactly why it had been shut down, but there were rumors that a terrible accident had happened there years ago, and that it was too haunted to be used again. Despite the rumors, a group of teenagers decided to explore the abandoned station one summer night. They were looking for some excitement and a chance to do something that none of their friends had done before. There were 4 of them, 2 boys and 2 girls, and they arrived at the station around midnight. As they made their way inside, they were immediately struck by the eerie silence and the oppressive darkness of the place. They could hear the sound of their own footsteps echoing off the walls, and the musty smell of old machinery and rust filled the air. As they walked further into the station, they noticed something odd. The station was almost completely intact. The ticket booth, the turnstile, the benches, and the old clock on the wall were all still there, as if the station had been frozen in time. It was as if the station was just waiting for someone to come and start it up again. The group explored the station for a while, taking pictures and joking around, but the longer they stayed, the more they started to feel uneasy. They started hearing strange sounds, like whispers and footsteps coming from the darkness. They tried to convince themselves that it was just their imagination, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Then, they heard something that made their blood run cold. It was the sound of a train whistle in the distance. They couldn't believe it. The station had been abandoned for years, so how could there be a train coming? But the sound grew louder and more distinct until they could hear the sound of the train chugging towards them. The group ran to the platform to see the train coming towards them. It was a ghostly apparition, a train from another time, with rusted wheels and a glowing green light at the front. The train screeched to a halt in front of them, and the doors opened, inviting them in. Despite their fear, the group decided to board the train. They were filled with a sense of adventure and excitement, and they wanted to see where the train would take them. As the train pulled out of the station, they saw that the surrounding landscape had changed. They were no longer in Ravenwood, but in a different place altogether. They saw strange, shadowy figures outside the windows, and they heard whispers and laughter from the other passengers on the train. They felt as if they were in a different dimension, and they were powerless to do anything but watch as the train hurtled down the tracks. Hours later, the train finally came to a stop at another abandoned railway station. The group disembarked, and they found that they were in a strange and desolate place, with no signs of life anywhere. The train disappeared into the darkness, leaving them stranded and alone. The group was terrified, but they knew they had to find a way back home. They made their way through the abandoned station, hoping to find a clue or some kind of sign that could help them. But as they walked, they noticed that they were being followed by a group of ghostly figures. They tried to run, but the figures were too fast. They closed in on the group, and they realized that the figures were the ghosts of people who had died in the terrible train accident that had happened years ago. The group was trapped, with no way to escape the ghosts that surrounded them. As the ghosts closed in on them, the group screamed in terror. But just before the ghosts could reach them, they suddenly vanished into thin air. The group looked around, confused and relieved, and they saw a figure in the distance. It was an old man, dressed in a conductor's uniform, who beckoned them over. He told them that they had been trapped in a loop, reliving the same train ride that had led to the fatal accident years ago. The old man had been the conductor on the train, and he had been searching for a way to break the curse ever since. With the help of the old man, the group was able to break the curse and find their way back home. They never spoke of the incident again, but they never forgot the terror of that night and the knowledge that sometimes the past can come back to haunt you in the most unexpected ways. The carnival had come to town, and everyone was excited to experience the rides, games, and attractions. But something was different about this carnival. There was an eerie energy that seemed to permeate every corner of the fairgrounds. As the sun set and the crowds began to thin, a group of teenagers decided to explore the carnival after hours. They were looking for a thrill, and they thought they could find it by sneaking around the dark, empty carnival. The group made their way through the silent, deserted rides and attractions, taking pictures and making jokes. But as they wandered deeper into the carnival, they began to notice that something was off. The air was thick with an unnameable dread, and they could hear strange, whispering voices on the wind. Then, they saw something that made their blood run cold. In the distance, they saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was tall and slender, with long, pointed fingers and glowing red eyes. They couldn't tell if it was human or something else, but they knew they had to get away. The group ran as fast as they could, but they could hear the figure pursuing them. They could feel its hot breath on their necks, and they could hear its low, guttural growl. They ran until they came to a dead end, a circle of old carnival booths with no way out. They huddled together, trying to catch their breath and think of a plan, but they knew they were trapped. That was when the figure appeared before them, its eyes glowing brighter in the darkness. It spoke to them, its voice low and menacing. "I have been waiting for you," it said. "You have come to my carnival, and now you must pay the price." The figure revealed itself to be the spirit of a former carnival worker who had been killed on the job. He had been seeking revenge on the living ever since, and he had trapped the teenagers in his own personal hell. The group was terrified, but they knew they had to find a way to escape. They tried to reason with the spirit, but he was beyond reason. He attacked them, slashing at them with his sharp claws and dragging them deeper into the dark, twisted carnival. The group struggled to survive, dodging the spirit's attacks and trying to find a way out. They ran through the carnival, passing by the rides and games they had enjoyed earlier. But now, everything was twisted and distorted, as if they were in a different reality. Finally, the group stumbled upon an old, rusted roller coaster. It was their last hope for escape. They climbed onto the coaster and pushed off, hurtling down the tracks at breakneck speed. The spirit pursued them, trying to catch them as they raced through the carnival. But the coaster had one more surprise for them. As it reached the end of the track, it launched into the air, soaring up into the sky. The group landed safely on the other side of the carnival gates, gasping for breath and clutching each other in relief. They looked back at the carnival, which was now silent and still. They knew they had escaped, but they could still feel the ghostly energy of the carnival haunting them. From that day on, the group knew to never underestimate the power of the supernatural, and they warned others to stay far away from the haunted carnival.